Jim and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears Podcast.
Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears Podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week, along with some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends, we review movies either current or classic. All right, I'm getting a lot of, we're going to pause it. I'm getting a lot of like motion blur.
Yeah, it's
again.
back.
Is my audio stuttery?
There were a couple small stutters, but more than anything, like your lips aren't fully matching your voice.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Weird.
just you're in slow-mo.
I wonder if we're having some kind of connection issue tonight. I'm gonna try and drop and come back real quick. And looks like we have a couple people hanging out with us already. Hey,
Right, bear with us, please.
Welcome to
Hey,
the
guys.
joys of doing it live. I'll be right back, guys. Hold
This
on.
is the fun part. You sound like a ticketing agent at Southwest Airlines.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Pull that up,
I think
please.
I'm back.
You are back.
It looks okay. Okay.
It looks pretty good.
great.
Yeah.
From the top.
All right. Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears Podcast. I'm Bradley Harris, and each week, along with some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends, we review films either current or classic on this show. And we've got not one, but two current films coming at you this episode. We are going to be reviewing The Conjuring, Rites, as well as The Long Walk. We always say that like horror and suspense movies and thrillers don't always necessarily get the, most love out there in podcast world. So we're doing our bit to spotlight, to amplify. It may not all be love, but you know what? It's the discussion we had along the way, I think, that matters most. In any event, before we get into those discussions, let me introduce you to my two wonderful co-hosts who I'm just so in adoration of every time we do this show. Your extensive knowledge, your warm personalities. Guys, I love you both. Jim Pugliafico is here with us. Hey, babe, how are you?
I'm here. I'm doing good. I am so excited to be back on the podcast, and it's been we've had a bit of a break here, but we're coming back strong with two new movies, and there's quite a bit to talk about with these two, quote unquote. Well, I don't know if we can call them both horror movies, but they're both. One is a horror movie for sure, and the other one is probably horror adjacent. But yeah, we're excited.
All right, excellent. And William Lindis is with us as well. Will, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Doing especially good tonight because we're getting ready to chat about a couple of movies. And I always love it when we get to do that. I think I know some of your thoughts on some of these just because I was poking around on Letterboxd earlier, catching up on a few things and saw some numbers. But there are some things that I don't know yet. So I'm excited for both the surprises and the non-surprises.
Awesome. Well, we should have a pretty great discussion across these two films. But while we're doing our discussing, we'd love to hear your discussion as well. So if you're with us in the live chat, feel free to say hello. Let us know what you think of these two films as we're talking them through. And if you're joining us on digital tape delay, maybe you're watching on YouTube a couple weeks from now or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we want to hear your thoughts too. So comments, whichever medium works for you. Let us know what you thought of The Conjuring Rites and The Long Walk. Jim, Will, are we ready to kick off our first movie discussion?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's look into the mirror and see what our reviews reflect back to us.
Mm-hmm. Let's not walk around this thing too long. Let's get right into it.
All right. Well, then here we go. We're going to kick things off with our first movie discussion, but actually, real quick, big love to Big Dan, who says, hello, sexy men. Hey, Dan, welcome. Glad to have you here.
That might be a Big Dan. We know Big Dan, right? I think
know
we
a
do.
couple Big Dans, but which
We
Big
do.
Dan?
We know some Big Dans. Just
Hey, Big Dan, glad to have you here with us. We love Dans collectively.
Yes, we
Yep.
do. All the Dans. Most of the Dans? Is there
All
a
the
Dan I
Dans.
don't like? I
All
don't
the
know.
Dans.
I don't know.
I'd have to think about that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
but the big ones we're here for.
Exactly. This is a bear show, after all. All right, we're going to talk about both movies spoiler free for probably about the first 10 minutes or so. We'll give our initial thoughts, and then we'll give you fair and clear warning before we open things up to spoilers. So feel free to, mute, unmute, do the things you got to do as we move through. It's Dan from Vegas. Now I know which Dan this is. Hey, Dan, welcome. Good to have you here
Dan.
once again. All right. Well, all of that said, here we go. Our first movie discussion of episode 536, The Conjuring, Last Rites. Ooh, spooky trailer. Well, for those who are listening to the audio version of the show, you just got to hear the trailer. If you're watching it live on YouTube, it was just silence, and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? Just pretend it was the Conjuring trailer. In any event, Jim, if you don't mind, kick this one off for us. I
Sure.
think at this point, most people know what these Conjuring movies are all about. There's only a million of them. But what is The Last Rites, and what were your initial spoiler-free thoughts?
Yeah, we're going to get into that. There have been quite a few Conjuring universe movies, the Conjuring verse, as we say, since the first Conjuring movie came out in 2013, believe it or not. So it's been like, what, 12 years of Conjuring movies. And in that Conjuring verse, of course, you have the Conjuring movies. We'll get to this latest movie, The Conjuring Last Rites is the name of it. But there are 9 total movies in the Conjuring verse, of which 4 of them are actual Conjuring movies. Then there's I think like 3 Annabelle movies that are in the Conjuring verse, and then there are a couple of Nun movies. The Nun is actually part of the Conjuring verse. So 9 movies altogether. We've got the latest one here, The Conjuring Last Rites. What's crazy about these movies is like, and we started to talk about this, Brad, you and I, when we saw the movie. It's like, where does this fall? Where does this case that this movie follows, where does it fall on the chronological timeline of the Conjuring verse? And it is the latest. It is the most recent case that's covered in these movies. It's set
like
in
chronologically, you mean?
chronologically. It's set in like 1986. The movies, though, chronologically start in 1952 with the 2 Nun movies, and then Annabelle movies, and the Conjuring movie is 1971. So, and that's when Ed and Lorraine Warren get involved. We all know and love Ed and Lorraine Warren, and that kooky couple who investigates paranormal activities, demon dirty deeds, and everything else. But yeah, so let me get into this movie that's supposed to be the last case, right? It's kind of promoted as like the last case of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And even in the film, I think they reference that a couple of times, or maybe it's in the epilogue, or I can't remember. But yeah, it's the last one. But then I did hear, by the way, there is another Conjuring movie that's
It's a
being worked.
prequel. Yeah.
This movie did so well that, of course, they're going to make another movie, but it is going to be a prequel. So it's going to come further back on the chronological timeline, but it will be obviously after this movie. And, we'll have to see if Ed and Lorraine are involved in that, and if it's the same actors. Of course, we have Patrick Wilson playing Ed and Vera Farmiga playing Lorraine. Great to see their face. Two great actors. And love to see them show up in this. Look, this film gives you exactly what, as Brad said at the top, he said, most people know what these Conjuring movies are. They kind of know what to expect. This movie is a very well-made movie, gives you exactly what you'd expect. There's a demon haunting happening somewhere. Ed and Lorraine are drawn into it. A priest is going to show up at some point, that for sure. And and then mayhem ensues. I found this movie to be, fine. It didn't knock my socks off. It didn't throw me any surprises. Why I would expect surprises, I don't know. But I always go into movies wanting to be, somewhat surprised and somewhat, have a movie show me something that hasn't shown me before. I don't think this movie did that, but I do think it's a fine Conjuring movie, and it's well acted. The script is fine. The scares are kind of okay. It didn't knock me. It didn't give me that weird uneasy feeling that something like a movie earlier this year called Weapons did. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't give me that it didn't creep me out that way, because again, you kind of know what to expect with these movies. So this is a middle of the road horror movie, a very expected, I guess, Conjuring movie, worth seeing, whether you see it in the movies or you see it when it's released on streaming. I think it's worth seeing as the last, so you can kind of see how Ed and Lorraine Warren end up doing on their last case that they work. But yeah, I think it's fine.
All right. Quote, I think it's fine. Going on the movie poster for The Conjuring, Last Rites.
Yeah. Studio will not be chasing me down for that one.
Right. All right. Will, how about you? How did this one land on your end?
It landed very similar to how it landed with Jim. So the Conjuring series is an interesting one in that overall with this franchise, you've got 4 fine movies at the core of him, and 5, those are not fine at all. Franchise expanding side stories in the Annabelle and the Nun stories. So I think I always come into the Conjuring movies a little down on them overall, just because the Annabelle of it all kind of rubs off on my memory, I guess, if that makes sense. But I was kind of re-looking through kind of my thoughts on the different Conjuring movies and kind of my thoughts here, and they feel like they're very middle of the road. They don't really do anything new or inventive, and if anything, they kind of fall into some very kind of familiar territory in places. And it is a little hard to get excited about a franchise where the main characters are sort of based off of real people who, for what it's worth for me, fraudsters. So I that's always sort of like a little like asterisk that I have with these. But
allegedly
alleged fraudsters. Yeah. But at the end of the day, what these movies do well is, first of all, they do have good like production quality. There's like a texture and a look to these, especially since they're like period piece films, even if that period is like mid 80s, it's not like, we're not talking this like, Dark Ages or, Victorian stuff, but still the movies look and feel not like they came from that time period. They're a little too slick for it, but that the production value at least lets me transport there. And the other thing they do is they give you enough of a character story to make it feel like the stuff that's getting thrown at the screen, matters at least to the characters that are going through it. In most cases, I think that's more for the people that are the case themselves. I think in this case, since they were writing it as the last Warren story, We really get to see what felt like to me the first story that really featured their emotional state as kind of the core place, that Ed Lorraine and another pivotal character. So ultimately, this is not a drop everything and go out of your way to see it movie. This is not a strong recommend or anything like that. But if you're curious about these, or I guess more likely, if you've watched some of the other ones and are curious how this ends, I think this is a perfectly fine way to wrap up the story. I think this is a perfectly fine movie as we kind of get ready to move into spooky season. I think this is a perfectly fine movie to go check out in theaters and kind of keep like the cinema experience alive. I just don't want to go any higher than a lowercase f fine with that description. So I'm right there with Jim when at the end of the review, he gave a bit of a shrug and said, it's fine. I'm going to give a bit of a shrug and say, it's fine.
Well, but you said perfectly fine a second ago. So which is it? Feature fire.
Lowercase f, fine.
Okay.
Yeah. This is not fine as in like, oh, it's fine, or like, it's elegant and fine. This is fine as in I'm trying to not be too committal with either positive or negative praise. And I think that's kind of where Jim lands too. Like ultimately on the probably positive, but I don't want to. But I don't want to go much further than that.
It's not like, look at that bear barista over there. He's fine. It's not that fine. It's it's more like this latte's fine.
Yeah. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. That latte that I just had did exactly what it was supposed to do. I didn't dislike the experience. I didn't hate that I spent the $5.99 on it, but I won't remember it in a couple of hours when I moved on with my day.
Yeah. All right. That's fair, to use another F word. All right, for me, and I'll go really quick so that we can preserve as much spoiler time as possible. I think I'm more favorable on this film than either of you were. I know the Warrens, allegedly fraudsters, but if I look at it through the lens of it's a horror
F
movie,
word.
and I want to enjoy a horror movie. This one was a pretty good ride for me. I liked seeing the story of the family that this movie features and what's happening with the hauntings or possessions or whatever things. I don't want to spoil the plot, but it's always great to see like the family of the movie, right? The inciting incident that brings Ed and Lorraine in. I was also really happy to see that this movie features a lot of Ed and Lorraine's family, including their daughter and some other characters that are sort of part of that sphere. What was interesting to me is I felt like this movie was like a third of the way in before we even got to any of the spooky, ooky Ed and Lorraine get involved stuff. And so I felt like I got to know a lot more about Ed and Lorraine and their daughter and their life. And so when the ooky, spooky stuff started and shit was hitting the fan, I actually cared more about these characters in this Conjuring movie than I think I have in any other Conjuring movie featuring them prior. So, for me, to the writers, like, kudos for making this more of a character drama than I think some of the previous films have been. It was great to be led into that world more. And honestly, I'm kind of curious about some things that maybe this sets up with some of those characters, either in, future timeline films or prequel films. I don't know what that's going to look like. This movie is about to cross the $500 million mark. It is like the third most successful horror movie in recent years, I guess. I was reading an article earlier. So of course they're going to make another one. We have a really good friend, Brian from LA, who was like, I'm so bummed this is the last Conjuring movie ever. And I'm like, dude, no, there's gonna be more. And the next day, the announcement that the prequel film was coming dropped, and he's like, oh yeah. Also, there's a prequel TV series that's coming, y'all.
So sequel TV series. It's actually going to continue the story. Yeah.
Oh, did I say prequel? I meant sequel. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think they're covering both sides of the movie timeline now, right? So they can go earlier in the movies, they can go after. And so I really want to talk about maybe some things this film sets up that we might see a revisit to with that sequel series that's coming. So anxious to get to that. And anyway, this was a fun ride for me. I enjoyed seeing it in theaters as sort of a prelude to the Halloween season. It was fun. I always kind of wish that I could see these movies like in October, though. It's like I want to see all the horror movies in October because it's Halloween, but the release schedules are what they are, and they got to do what they got to do, so.
As long as pumpkin spice lattes are released at the same time that these movies are, you're officially in Halloween season.
That's
so.
true. Spooky
Yeah.
season is not a 31-day
Okay.
season. Spooky season is a state of mind that starts as soon as you start to feel it. And
Okay.
Jim and I are about to binge like 30 plus horror movies. We can count spooky season a little early.
Okay. All right. In any event, this is definitely a recommend for me. It's been a couple weeks since this film came out. I think a lot of people have already seen it, but it's still making the rounds. So if you're in the mood for something spooky, grab your pumpkin spice latte and your red cardigan sweater and sidle up to this film because it's a spooky good time. Fellas, are we ready for spoilers on this one?
I am, because you mentioned something in your section that I'd like to first to dive into in spoilers, which is about how this movie focused less on the ghost story and more on the characters. And so I'd like to, when we get to as we move into spoilers, like really talk about that ghost story part of it. So that's the keep listening after the Brad gives the preamble, listeners. We've got more of that to come.
There you go. All right. And Jim, I saw you're not along. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and open things up to spoilers. If you continue to listen for the next 13 minutes and 7 seconds, you do so at your own peril. We're going to be spoiling this film. Who am I kidding? It's probably going to be like at least another 20 minutes, but that's fine. It's great talk. But remember, we're going to be discussing The Long Walk, the Stephen King adaptation after this film. So if you haven't seen The Conjuring Last Rites and you're like, I'm going to exit because of spoilers, be sure to come back in a little while and catch our Long Walk review. Here we go. Spoilers are officially fair game. You know that's true because if you're watching on YouTube, you see the little ticker scrolling across the bottom, letting you know spoilers are happening. So, Will, you said that you wanted to talk more about something that I had kind of mentioned earlier, but then you said you wanted to talk more about the ghost story. Is it the ghost story or the family story? Or
So
both?
so both, because one of the things that I saw was so different about this than some of the others are when you think about the different cases that they've been through, you can think to like, oh, they kind of defined it as this type of spirit is causing it, and so this is what we're doing here. And um this movie pulls back away from that. There's spooky stuff and there's a mirror that it's attached to, but of all of these, the ghost story is the least clearly defined of any of those. But they spent all of that extra time that they would have normally spent on people researching in books to figure out what the ghost is, to dealing with the family backstory. So that's what you would hit at there, was kind of that extra focus on the character. And I wanted to really talk about how it came at a sacrifice, but I don't think that it was a bad sacrifice.
Yeah, I think part of it is like it's the 80s now in the world of these movies, right? And so it's not we don't need the same like microfiche scenes like sorting through articles from the 30s about blah, 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 it's like the technology has advanced some. The Warrens are also further in their career at this point. They're also like detached from their career, right? They've like largely retired because of Ed's heart. So it's like they kind of get pulled into this like in the middle of it. The daughter just goes. So whereas in previous movies, the Warrens would like be doing their research and looking into all the things, they just fucking get in a car to go save their daughter, who they think is in trouble, and they get pulled in. I think as a vehicle for bringing the Warrens into it, that works fairly well. I do think that from a character building standpoint, at least for me, And if the daughter's going to be involved, like in the sequel series that's coming, I don't know what it's going to focus on. I appreciate that the movie did some of that setup work, because I think previously we'd seen the daughter when she was younger, right? She was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something in one of the
That's
previous movies we
possible.
saw. Yeah.
Yeah, because the a lot of the other movies sort of take place in the mid to late
Mhm.
70s, and this one takes in the late
Yeah,
80s.
it's like
And
mid to late 80s.
with her age, she would be kind of
She
in
would have been
that
born. Yeah.
Yeah.
7 to 12 age,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah. I remember a scene about her like going down into the basement with the Annabelle doll and like wanting to open the case, and you know, um craziness ensued. But anyway, so if this movie is kind of a bridge to some of what may come later, I think, it's probably good that the movie did some of that work. And honestly, I'm just gonna say this: I've seen so many horror movies now. Even fucking Weapons did it, y'all, where it's like, oh, looking through the old newspapers, researching the stuff. It's like I don't need that anymore. Like, I've seen that a million times. Spend that time doing something else substantive. And I feel like this movie gets an extra half star from me for sacrificing some of that time to give us more of the emotional family stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wish
Oh, go ahead.
you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. You had mentioned, the family stuff, which and the family that's affected, right? Which before the Warrens even get involved in this case, right? Other than their daughter, there's this family in, I don't know, Scranton or wherever they are, somewhere in Pennsylvania, maybe Pittsburgh or whatever, that are going through some rough times with demons. And I just wish I wish the movie had me care more, or made me care more. I could understand that the characters were caring, obviously, about what was going on. I could understand that intellectually, but emotionally, I just didn't feel it very much. And it kind of wants to make me. It kind of makes me want to go back and see like the first and second. I remember really digging the first and second Conjuring movies a lot, and I just kind of want to go back and kind of, as a touchstone, maybe watch the first one and see what it was about that first one. And it's same thing with the Annabelle stuff. Like the first Annabelle movie, I know, Will, you said that it kind of watered down the Conjuring verse a bit, but that first Annabelle movie wasn't terrible. It was kind of a sensation when it came out. It was, this goofy stuff going on, but I think it was at least something a little bit new at the time.
Hmm.
Well, you could say new, but then of course we have Chucky, and we have doll horror. That's a whole subgenre, I'm sure. But yeah, I guess it's weird, and I think this is a me problem, maybe not a movie problem. Is that like as these series of movies go, I generally love the first iteration, and then from there, it's like diminishing returns after that for me, as each sequel is put out. And I think that's just me. I think that I think my brain and my movie going geek inside me wants to be surprised, wants to see something new, and wants to be, cover some new ground instead of the old stuff. And that's just me.
Yeah. Will, did the family stuff with the Warrens, back to your question, like, did that sacrifice that you mentioned, was it worth it for you to sacrifice some of the like more tropey scenes?
Yeah. So it's yes and no. Ultimately, like, focusing on the characters was good. But as we did kind of in the pre part of this, this didn't knock my socks off, right? And so what it did well was it made us care a little bit more about the Warrens than we normally do. And it sacrificed some of the time spent with the ghost investigation stuff, which ultimately I think is good. What they could have then done as well, and I think this would have solved some of my problems with it, is one, maybe given us a little bit more time with the Smurl family. Not necessarily up front. We get front loaded with them a little bit, but once the Warrens get involved, the Smurls just kind of fuck off to outside, and they're not really part of the story anymore. And so I would have liked to have seen a little more. And the other thing I would have liked to have seen is the part of the ghost story that did not work for me is that even what we had wasn't really well defined. And I don't mean like defined as in like we learned the lore of everything, but more as in sometimes a thing would just appear and all of a sudden it would be like, oh, I guess that's the thing that's scaring them right now. And there might be a throwaway line about it, but it didn't feel as well defined as even something I didn't like as much, Annabelle. Okay, it's a demon that's possessing a doll that's trying to get through to the kids who play with it. Okay, great. That's I don't need microfiche. I don't need like them going through the papers, but I at least need to kind of like have what my threat is defined. And here we didn't really define the threat except for the mirror was bad and bad shit started happening to them.
Well, I think that the problem is there's multiple threads here, and they're both a little complicated.
Yeah.
So the whole thing with this one is there's a demon that's associated with this mirror that is using the ghosts from this murder in the past
Yes.
to haunt the family as like a disguise for itself and what it's really doing. So not only do you have the story about like the axe wielding crazy guy who killed his, wife and mom, but then we also have, the demon in the mirror and their connection, with Lorraine and that whole thing. And so it's like there's multiple layers of stuff happening. Whereas in previous movies, it's just, oh, it's Ezekiel the demon. I read about him in this book that just happens to be on this shelf in this house where this is going on. Now we know what to do. So I think it muddies the waters a little bit. Also, real quick, while I'm thinking about it, fuck to the Ghostbusters references. It's the 80s. I was so hoping. And when that kid was like, what are you going to do? Call the Ghostbusters? I was like, that's fucking awesome.
You know what? For someone who was underwhelmed by the most recent Ghostbuster movies and was merely whelmed with The Conjuring, if they matched those two up, for me, all stonks are rising up. Like this is a really high potential for me. So, Brad, you may have just saved two franchises.
That's what I do.
Well, not financially, but saved for me. They're doing fine financially.
There's a lot of trope borrowing, I guess. Not tropes, but like there's a lot of beat borrowing in this movie from other, what I would say, greater horror movies. You have The Mirror, which we've seen in like, what is it, Oculus? What was it? The movie that had the mirror that was haunted. I mean, that was Oculus. Yeah, that's we saw that. I think was it one or two of those movies. I think there might have been two. And then we had, of course, the sink. The blood gushing out of the sink, which was to me felt like a Shining reference a little bit. The blood just kind of gushing out the sink and splashing all over Vera Farmiga, whoever it was, the sink. It just, everything I saw, I was like, oh, that's like The Shining. And, I remember how I felt during The Shining, which was not how I felt seeing it in this movie, unfortunately. Yeah.
For me, the way I think about it is at this point, after, 100 plus years or whatever of horror movies, it's like Legos, you guys. Each of those movies foundationally was like a new type of Lego brick. First blood gush scene, first mirror scene. At this point, there are no more types of Legos we haven't seen yet, but it's about how the Legos are put together and what they make out of those Legos. So yeah, Jim, to your point, blood gush,
sure,
mirror, it's
I
like
could
the
see
Blumhouse openings, right, where you see all the tropes. It's just what combination are they in, and is it interesting here?
Yeah, they know what sandbox they're in.
Yeah, tropes aren't bad. Tropes are not bad. They are the common thread with which we have, with which we communicate to one another. Because it's conversational shorthand. If I'm about to tell you a ghost story on Halloween, I'll probably dim the lights. Well, everyone does that. Everyone's dimming the lights to tell ghost stories, but at the same time, it's like, it creates atmosphere, it creates mood, and it creates the shorthand for the audience. Like, okay, I need to put myself in a place where I can allow myself to be scared. So that's what these things do. And so tropes aren't necessarily good or bad in and of themselves.
No.
I will say here, I don't, I think what I really wanted to see, and I think you're absolutely right, Brad, about the, the story of it, the mirror and the ghosts being used as the front of it. And they spend some time explaining that. That must be what's happening. But we really don't see the ghosts come out and do a whole lot. And we see the mirror doing its own sort of like subversive head game things just as much. And so it almost feels like, to me, they could have cut the ghosts out. Like, I don't think if you cut those out and just make it to where like the effect that the mirror has on them is X, and it does, that's spooky enough. And it's, again, it's not like they have to be true to the true story of it either, because the true story, like if you even go into the true story of it, the Warrens were there for like a month in the Smurl house, and they recorded some things that sounded like knocking, and that was sort of like their takeaway after that was like, all right, there's demonic possession because we heard. So, there was no like, blood flying across them and ghosts chasing them with axes, even in their own accounting. So if you don't have to be true to that, make some good edits. And I think I would have cut the ghosts, and like the scene early in the movie where the girl just starts coughing up the glass. That was terrifying.
Yeah.
And grotesque and awful, but like it made me feel afraid of that mirror in a way that like the ghost story didn't make me afraid of the mirror, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Jim, any final thoughts before we look to wrap this one up and move on?
No, I don't want to extend us any further. I know we've gone long. We got another movie to talk about. I know this movie was tremendously successful, so there's something there about this movie that really struck a chord with audiences and horror fans, obviously. So good on it. And I am still excited for a prequel movie.
Yeah, whether it's the young actors for Ed and Lorraine we saw at the beginning of this movie, right, or it's Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, like just earlier in the timeline, I'll be curious to see. But honestly, if they need the younger actors, they could do a whole slew of films in like the 50s and 60s period, right? And then we get to keep those period pieces, which I always thought was fun.
You could even turn it into a, like, the name itself carries enough weight that you don't even have to necessarily do a bunch of weaving them into the same overall story. Like, I'm thinking about, like, do you remember the Friday the 13th, the series back in the 80s? And that was like not about like, Jason Voorhees running around with a machete. It was people looking for these cursed objects, and each one was sort of an episode of the week. You could make a very compelling series where you follow a core character around these, maybe the Warren's daughter or what have you, and sort of let her do sort of these episode of the week style hauntings or things like that. Like, there's a lot of ways you can slice this that would be compelling.
They've got a whole room full or garage full of these icons. Yeah,
it could be like reading Rainbow. It's like, the cursed object that I brought today is blah 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 blah. Let me tell you.
Who's that cursed object? It's Annabelle.
Right. By the way, last thought from me on this film. What did y'all think of the wedding scene at the end, where we had a bunch of the families from the previous movies show up in attendance?
That was cool. I did like that. If you're a hardcore Conjuring fan, I think seeing that was kind of cool. It was a cool like throwback and callback to those previous movies.
Yeah, I thought it was a good decision, even if I didn't appreciate it. And I guess what I mean by that is, as they're cutting around, I didn't remember any of those families.
I think
so. As they were showing all of those shots, I did the mental math. Like, okay, these must be the family from the previous movie. So I recognized that's who they were because of the way the camera lingered on them, without really remembering any of them except for Francis. I forget.
Lily Taylor was there.
Lily Taylor, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Lily Taylor was there.
And
a couple others.
I don't know if you noticed when they showed Lily Taylor, they showed someone like clapping behind her head, which was like the whole thing from the first one with the
Oh
ghost
yeah,
clapping
Oh, yeah.
behind
See,
her.
yeah.
that's all it takes is just and maybe
Yeah.
you don't get it like right at the time that you're seeing it, but it does spark, it did
Mhm.
spark
Yeah.
that, oh yeah, that recollection of those movies. And that's what made me want to go back and see some of these first movies.
Yeah.
I'd watch the first one at least again for sure.
Yeah, I
It's
think
my
it'd be
favorite.
fun.
Yeah.
Maybe that's maybe no, I don't. I never mind. I was gonna say that would be a good like fill in the gaps Halloween review, but I don't necessarily want to go.
Listen,
I may not rejoin you on that journey.
if I get my way, and it's not about my way, but I'll just add my voice. We're going to be reviewing Good Boy during Halloween spooky season.
Oh, we're gonna. I mean,
We have to, right?
Let's do it. Yeah, hard yes.
Ghost movie from the dog's perspective. Like, where can you go?
People are frothing at the mouth to get that movie out.
Oh my god, I know.
I've seen it. Everybody who sees the trailer is like, "Oh my god, I got to see this movie. Where is it?
Yeah.
When is it? Blah blah blah."
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that movie's wonderful." And they're like, "How did you see it?" And I'm like, "Oh, we saw it at South by Southwest." And I'm like, "I got to pet the dog." And they're like, "Don't you fucking talk to me. I hate you." And I'm like,
Aw.
I'm sorry. But it's a phenomenal film. I can't wait for it to come out. If we could somehow get the dog from Good Boy into a Conjuring movie, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I may have to find a way to bring my dog to that review.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
There you go. All right. Well, I think it's time for us to take a short walk to the long walk because we have another movie to review. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears. I have turned off the spoiler ticker because we are done with our first movie discussion. And we're going to move into our discussion of The Long Walk. If you missed the spoiler warning up front, we'll talk about this film spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes or so as we briefly give our initial impressions. And then we'll give you a nice big fat spoiler warning before we open that discussion up full bore. But here we go. Our discussion of The Long Walk. Big Dan in the chat says, "Long walk, baby." Yes, indeed.
Long walk.
It is that time. I think a lot of people have been ravenous for this movie to come out too, and it's here. Will, we were having a great conversation with you over the weekend, kind of about your experience seeing this film, and I can think of no one better to kick this discussion off for us. So, for anyone who's not familiar, what is The Long Walk? And maybe share a little about your initial thoughts, your experience seeing the movie. How'd you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, The Long Walk it's an adaptation of a Stephen King book is kind of the simple sentence on this. The story itself and kind of like, and sort of important kind of the backstory on this goes a little deeper. This was the first book that Stephen King wrote when he was 18, 19 years old. It was not, he was freshman in college. It didn't get published. He was a freshman in college. He just wrote this book. And then it gets sort of shelved for a while, and then he becomes more popular for writing his, kind of Stephen King brand of horror books. And there's a certain point in his career, about 13 years after he originally wrote it, where he says, I want to release some books under a pseudonym to make sure people like my writing and not, the Stephen King name. So one of those books under that Richard Bachman title was The Long Walk. So his first book written, but nowhere near his first book published. This is important in the context because this is a movie written by a 19-year-old sort of on the edge of kind of like Vietnam War, who is writing about a bunch of, 17 to 19-year-old boys. So this was written by King when he was of the age of the characters. And the story follows these boys in a dystopian alternate version of Earth. The timeline itself, you can't really get a finger on the pulse on. It feels like it's sometime post 70s, but we don't know by how much. We just know that there was a massive war that happened at one point. And these boys, 50 of them all together here in the movie, are entered in and win this lottery to compete in the long walk, where they start and they have to continue walking at 3 miles an hour or faster. If they drop below that, they get a warning. If they get 3 warnings, they're out of the game. And by out of the game, that means permanently via gunshot. So it's the story of these boys on this walk, bonding with one another through this horrendous thing that's happening to them. Tonally, it's sort of a combination between the whittling down of like a battle royale or a Squid Game or whatever, but with the atmosphere of, you know, kind of like more of like a dull, dingy, kind of bleak dystopian future, and with the mood of Stephen King's Stand By Me, you know, boys connecting on this walk. This is one of my favorite movies of the year. It's, you know, simply put, if I used some F words before, I'm going to say this one is fucking fantastic. It is brutal in how emotional it is. It doesn't let you veer away from kind of the connections and the severing of the connections that happen between these boys on this walk. It's also emotionally brutal. There's a lot of, like, you know, intense things that happen that we have to go through, but it is written that, you know, it is written by written. I'm talking here about the movie, not the book. Every scene of this movie is written with intention that all kind of culminates in something absolutely beautiful. I adore the book. I love the book. I adore the movie. I love the movie. There are changes between the two, and it doesn't matter because both are incredibly confident in the stories that they're telling. So this is a huge recommendation from me, with the caveat of this is bleak and there are parts of it that are going to be hard to watch for some audience members. So this may not be a movie for literally everyone, but if anyone who enjoys and can get over kind of like the bleakness and kind of like the kids getting murdered of it all, if you can get past those things on film, this is a high recommend. It just nails what it's going for.
All right. Well, thank you so much. If you can get past child murder, this is the movie for you.
Hey, look, as a country, I think we have no problem doing that, right?
I didn't want to get into that, but I mean,
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah,
we're
we don't
okay with
necessarily
it, right?
have to, but yeah.
Yeah, but point well made and taken. Jim, how about for you? What did you think of The Long Walk?
So I have to admit, I knew we were going to probably see this movie, and I was very apprehensive about seeing this movie. I had not read the book, had not really even heard about the book, and saw the trailer, and I'm like, oh boy, this, you know, I get a sense of the movie from the trailer, and I honestly didn't. I wanted to see it because I was curious about it. I wanted to see what the real bones of this movie were and what the messaging would be and what I could get out of it. But I could see some of the content of the film being very bleak. As Will, you mentioned, I totally agree with you. This is a very bleak film, kind of all the way through, from the beginning to the end. The movie takes us on this long walk of over 200 miles or something. And you know, nothing really good. Well, we'll talk about that. I don't want to get into spoilers, but I will say that I have to say that there's a lot of emotional stuff in here. There's a lot of emotional dialogue, a lot of emotional character work in here. I felt a lot of that. I don't know if it 100% worked on me all the way around, because of the bleakness. I think, you know, I wanted to see more. I wanted to know. I'm not sure what the movie was really trying to say, and we'll get into some of the themes, potential or possible themes of this movie. I will say that the movie made me want to read the book because I wonder if the book will get the themes across a little better. I was getting that vibe, Will, of like, Vietnam War, you know, boys getting drafted to go over and kill other boys. You know what I mean? And I was getting a lot of that vibe in this. I was getting a lot of Stand By Me vibes, obviously. I mean, there's some themes there about camaraderie and kind of bonding over horrible things. Humans, in this case, boys or young men, bonding over horrible things, and in some cases, uh, boys or young men who wouldn't necessarily bond otherwise are kind of forced into this difficult situation, to say the least. Also got a lot of vibes, and I just looked it up. I got a lot of vibes of like, oh, these feels kind of like the Hunger Games a little bit. Like, a lottery system, killing children, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of all there. The first book of the Hunger Games didn't come out till like 2008 or something like that. I looked that up. So this movie was written like 40 years before that. The book was written 40 years before that.
But
So,
Jim, if I
this
may,
is the original Hunger Games.
If I may add to what you're saying there, the director of this, Francis Lawrence, actually directed, I think 4 of the 5 Hunger Games movies.
Oh,
so
okay.
All of them except for the first one. So you stumbled upon something else there pretty well.
Yeah,
So
well, there you go. Thanks,
we
Will.
need someone
I didn't
who
realize that.
Someone who can do child murder. Let's go to that well again.
You know the guy to go to. Yeah. But yes, really bleak. We'll talk about the details and maybe some of the themes when we get into spoilers a little bit more. But I will say, yeah, this movie is not for everybody. It is a tough watch. I don't know if there's any reward in this movie. That's kind of where, I'm looking for the emotional reward, and I'm not sure we get it, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Maybe it is, and I just didn't see it. Babe, what did you? I would say, it's hard to recommend this film. It's a good film. It's a very well made film, very well acted film. The actors here, we saw the Cooper Hoffman. He's Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. He was the kid in Black Licorice, right? And so he comes from a great acting family. I think the big star here was David Johnson, who played Peter McVrise in this film, number 23, if you will. I think he was the for me anyway, he was kind of the standout, even though another actor, Charlie Plummer, who's in here, who was in a movie called Lean on Pete, and he's been in a couple of other movies. He's a great actor. Unfortunately, he gets to play a character who's not very I don't know. We'll talk about maybe we'll get to talk about his character, but he's a very he's a tough character to connect with. Let me just say that. But he's a great actor too. A lot of great young actors here. And of course, we have Mark Hamill in this. Roman Griffin Davis. I recognize that name from Rabbit. What was it, Will?
Jojo Rabbit.
What was the movie? Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, he was a young boy in Jojo Rabbit. But sorry, I went on way too long, babe. I'm going to step aside and say I don't know whether I can recommend this movie. It's a tough watch. But if you're okay with that, this, I think, is worth watching just for its commitment to the story.
Jim,
All right.
unfortunately, after that, we had to take $100 out of the charity pot. The thing from the Emmys where this last weekend, where when people went on too long, there was like a running joke about we're going to add or remove money from a charity pot. Became kind of like that was kind of in weird taste. So,
well, they're probably going to have to rename that pot after me because it's all the money in there, will be from my payroll. But yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, you started to tee me up, and then I was like, ooh, I know all the things I'm going to talk about, and then you talked about all the things I was going to talk about.
Oh
So
no, sorry.
I try to fill the holes you guys don't fill, so that all fills get hold, all holes get filled, all filled get holes. I mean, both work.
Both work.
So
Phil
let me
and
just
Dan.
say, one tidbit I wanted to call out from my perspective was, Will, you were talking about like Stephen King writing this when he was very young, 19. I think one of the characters in the film is a Stephen King like stand-in. Like he's got the glasses, he's writing the book, and um I I feel like there was a Stephen King stand-in character in it and some of the other ones as well. So I was like, yep, this is definitely a Stephen King movie. But the whole Hunger Games like vibe and feel was like all over this. And I'm just waiting for Jennifer Lawrence to like show up on the side of the road in like a tattered sundress or something, is just like a wink and a nod to those films. But yeah, this one for me, I know that a lot of people are having very visceral reactions to it, and I think that's great. I think this movie has a lot to say about even like our current day society, even though it's like in an alternate world. My thing is though, like I've seen so much torture porn in movies that this just felt like a rehash of a lot of that for me, and it felt like it didn't do it as good as some other things did. This felt sort of like, I don't know, Saw and the Hunger Games had a baby, and just for me, it didn't work as well. Part of it feels like, and maybe it's because this story was written so long ago and we've had so many movies that do similar things. And I also think it invokes a lot of the vibes from Civil War, which we talked about on the show earlier, I think in the year. Um, I find myself just comparing this movie to Civil War and being like, Civil War was like a much better way of like saying some of the things this film says. So, not to say that, you shouldn't assess movies on their own for what they are, but I just found myself kind of wishing like all these like bits of lore about this world are like being dropped, and I'm really curious about them and I want to know more about this world. And like, why does everybody know the words to a certain song that, doesn't seem very, like applicable in like a today world? I'm like, how do they all know the words? And so I don't know. It just left me scratching my head and wanting to explore the world more. But because of the conceit of the film, we're with this one group of people, for all these miles that they're walking. So we don't really get much of an opportunity to explore that external world. And I don't know, maybe the book does that. Maybe if I read the book, I'd get more of that. I don't usually ask for movies to be longer because I feel like movies are too damn long these days. But I almost wish this one had spent a little bit more time with kind of like establishing the world before we get into the conceit of the long walk, like done a little more table setting. But the movie's fine for what it is. It didn't blow my socks off. But I will now invoke the F word, fine, for the long walk. If you're looking for something to see in theaters right now, there's not a ton out that's super great, maybe. I think this is a strong contender, like for your movie going dollars, but yeah, just be aware, like, it may be a bit of a hard watch for you. Or it may not be if you've seen lots of torture porn movies. But yeah, it's fine.
I do want to call out a couple things here before we move to spoilers. And Jim hit on kind of one of the major parts of this here. The cast on this is just an absolute rogues gallery, top to bottom. You've got Mark Hamill in a pretty impressive, gruff, not very likable character. All the different young actors that we've got here, Cooper Hoffman, David Johnson, I think gives one of the strongest performances of the year, just hands down. What he does here as the Peter McCree's character. Ben Wang is in this, who we also saw as he was the lead in the most recent Karate Kid movie. So that he's had kind of a big year. And Jim, I was wondering kind of like how your Charlie Plummer addiction would go, having seen this one. I really appreciated him in this role because my favorite thing of his was spontaneous. And he plays, he doesn't plays like loud of an asshole type characters he plays here. So it was fun seeing him just like really showcase that range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It definitely is, as from an actor who plays a lot of likable roles, this was definitely a turn, a career turn. So, and I think it's good. I think it's good for actors to stretch themselves that way, instead of getting like put into the nice guy role all the time. But yeah, I all right, we got to get into spoilers because I don't want to say anymore.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move things over to spoiler territory. If you continue to watch, you do so knowing that we are about to spoil all of the salient plot points of this film. Step away, do what you will. There are no plugs this episode since this is a double review. So the only thing you're going to miss if you step away now is how to get in touch with us in between episodes. And if you want to know how to do that, just pull up our Facebook page or Twitter at MB Podcast. And you can find an interface with us that way. But all of that said, spoilers for The Long Walk are officially fair game. Where do y'all want to start?
I want to talk about the setup of this film. Supposedly all of these boys entered themselves into the lottery, right? This seemed like it was voluntary. And I think I struggled because I don't know if the movie established why. I mean, in the case of Raymond Garrity, number 47, kind of the lead character, his motivation for going in seemed like revenge. He was kind of on a revenge thing, but the rest of them I wasn't sure. Like, why did they end up here? How did they end up here? Like, what it robbed me of some of the emotional. Unless I missed something, it robbed me of some of the emotional tension that there would have been. Like, why would I enter something as one of 50 people who has a very high probability of getting killed?
And that's part of where I was coming from with the table setting piece, wanting to see more of this world and establishing it. Like, I know we keep going back to the Hunger Games movies, but I mean, there's a connection there. At least that world sets up a lot about like why there's a lottery, right, in Pan Am, why they do these Hunger Games every year. It establishes some like emotional stakes and weight behind the state of the world that has led up to this.
Right.
In this movie, they do give us a little bit. They're like, oh, this, there's even that moment where they're talking about how it's not really them like volunteering to enter themselves because everybody does it. It's the expectation that you do. So you don't really have a choice. But I think the only explanation that we really get is that this happens as a reminder of like patriotism and why people shouldn't be lazy and, economic disparity. And while that's good, as someone who did not read the book, I don't think it did enough to really set the stakes up emotionally enough for me to really hook into it and understand it as well. Maybe it's different for book readers. I don't know.
So it's hard because, I mean, I've both read it and I've watched it, but I'm only going off of kind of what was presented in the movie for what I'm about to say here, right? One of the things that they present is just the amount of like poverty that each of these characters has, right? We see it through the fact that like they all show up in essentially like dystopian dust rag clothes, right? None of these people are well off. This is the closest analogy to this is something that we see in our own society right now, and that's if you look at the reasons why people join the military, like the number one thing is because of like college. That's the number one reason that gets reported is college opportunities, right?
Or
at
the time the book was written, they were drafted. Like you didn't have a choice, right?
So
at that
time, yes. But even looking at this as a parallel to today, right? So what we're doing as a society. And this isn't anything against the military that I'm about to say, more like the, kind of the circumstances that sort of force some people who may not otherwise want to join the military to join, right? The socioeconomic stuff. For some people, based on where they live and kind of what side of the tracks that they live on, their opportunities are limited, and one of the only ways to sort of get out of the life that they have is to join the military. And so that's what this movie is sort of saying along those lines, is like, hey, we're taking kind of like our in the case of this, young men, if we're talking about kind of the draft example of this, and we're dangling the carrot of this is your only chance of getting out of this, and we're doing it by kind of throwing their bodies into a meat grinder. You could definitely see that around the time of kind of what King would have been feeling as a college student, who's seeing other people drafted kind of around him around that same time. And as the film gets adapted here for modern day, where we have some of those same socioeconomic things, as well as we have a, what some could consider to be sort of like a burgeoning fascist authoritarian streak to the way some of our government's handling. So I want to talk a little bit about that here in a moment, because that really plays into the Ray and Peter of it all. But in terms of like the world building here, I will say personally, and the book doesn't like go into like the war then did this and that. They talk about there was a war, and afterwards, like,
Things were bad.
Things aren't great. And you mostly just learn about the boys sort of about this the same way we hear about it here in the movie, which is the boys sort of telling their story, and you kind of reading behind the lines of some of the stories, which characters, like what they have, what they don't have access to, what their opportunities are. The fact that one of them, apparently did this walk while having a wife, which we learned about the Hank character, which you only do if it feels like it's the only way to be able to support her, or to support a family, or what have you.
Well, but wait a second. I thought the conceit of this, we had the whole speech from the Garrity character about how every boy signs up for it. Rich, poor, every boy signs up for it because the expectation is that you sign up for it. So how do we know that every boy is like a poor destitute, like this is their only way? Like, or do they only choose the poor boys? Is that what's happening?
Looks like they only chose the poor boys here.
They're wearing walking clothes, so I can't assume that just because someone's wearing like walking shoes and not their finest nice clothes that
I'm not saying they have to wear tuxes, but look at the way they code, they code everything. All of the characters, even at the beginning of the walk, are wearing sort of dusty and stained clothing. They're not wearing kind of like, new running shoes, a nice, because that's not the world that these characters live in. These characters live in a world where resources are scarce. They mentioned that, in the movie. So I think that's, the idea of everyone does it isn't necessarily because like they're forced to do it, or
they want to,
there's social pressure for it, or even that they want to. It's that there is a pipeline in this where the only way out of the circumstances that these people live in is to go on this walk and hopefully outlive 49 other people so you can get your wish and claw your way forward and above. That's why Ray's journey is especially curious, because he's the one that sort of has a counter mission.
But why the speech about the social pressure to sign up for this thing? I think that's why it's confusing. If this was established as just something that like only the poor people signed up for, like a poor district in the Hunger Games or something, and that's why we picked somebody, I think it would make a lot more sense to me, and maybe it would have landed better. And again, maybe the book does a better job of setting it up than the movie, but it felt confusing to me, and I'm like, oh, the rich boys sign up for this too, and yeah, everyone's wearing rags, but like, you're not going to wear an Armani suit to walk 300 miles. I would have been like, I would have dressed that way.
I would have been like, I'll live my poor life. Like, I will live my poor life if I can live. Like, I don't know, maybe I have a different view on life, but I would live my poor life and help my family the way I can. But I'm not jumping into the meat grinder for a chance at a prize.
Yeah.
And the prizes Dan calls out in the chat isn't just the money, by the way. Just something to remember. There was also the wish. So even if you're rich and have tons of money, you get this wish that can be fulfilled. So it's not just the money and the poor part necessarily.
It's not, but the movie sets that up as, and I get that,
There's boundaries on that. You can't wish for the end of the long walk. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't wish
The-
for anything.
The movie is really setting out to tell this sort of socioeconomic story about like how we force people into these very narrow lanes, and that's what that conversation was about. Not that like, you know, there are no rich people in Armani suits. You know, the you know, in this, you know, we even see in the communities they go through, they're all ramshackle communities. You know, even the bigger cities that they go through, everything, you know, there is a definite striation between the classes there. And
Well, but
I
how do
think
we know there's not like a capital district where everybody is rich, like in the Hunger Games, and we're just not seeing it because it's not taking place in multiple locations? They're
they,
walking through rural Georgia or whatever. Like, of course it's ramshackle communities. They're televising it. They want it to look a certain way.
I mean, but I would say that only really applies if like, there's no reason to believe that there's like a Pan Am or something like that, because this world doesn't set that up. You know, like what this is just
No.
the world that it sets up is the world that we inhabit here.
Well,
I think
we
this
see
is
a
for
slice. We see a slice of what the world is set up. We don't see the whole world. And I think that's part of, at least I'm not trying to be difficult, but that's where part of my confusion comes from, because
sure.
I don't know what the rest of the world is like. So I'm trying to figure out as I'm watching this movie, is what I'm seeing and what these specific characters, these 50 boys out of however many, right, in their life, is their experience, the experience of the whole world and what's happening right now. And I find myself asking more questions about the lore and how the world is and why it works this way than I do like what they're individually saying. It's just it's confusing, and when it's confusing, it's hard to connect in and land for people, I think.
The world in the movie is right in front of us, right? That's pretty much all we get. I mean, we get a little bit of Ray's background. We get a little bit of dialogue about Peter's background. That's about it. So we don't see the world. We see the world in front of us, which is on that road with those kids. That's the world we see. And the problem is, I think the movie begs the question. No, yeah, but I think the movie begs the question of like, how do you get like 50 boys across society to sign up to be murdered? Like, how the fuck does that happen? You know?
And not only that, but like it almost takes some of the interesting stuff away if it's all the poor boys, because there was the kid who's like mean and nasty and like making fun of
Charlie
people and gets
Plummer's
one of the other kids killed. And I'm like, God, he seems like every like fucking rich kid bully that I knew growing up with. Is he a rich kid? Did he come from a rich family and that's why he's acting this way? Like,
no, I think that was his defense mechanism, right? Kicking in, like that was his
maybe.
coping mechanism, is being an asshole and trying to like put himself above people, and acting out that way. Obviously, he had emotional issues, right? And so, whether or not we cared, we saw that in that character or not, that's on the movie. But yeah, this is a great discussion, guys. This movie, you know, this is a sign of a good movie, right? It's causing us to have these discussions and disagreements and agreements and stuff, and I think that's awesome. This is why we see movies, right? I'd love to have these discussions with both of you. And Brad, I know you and I don't have these discussions, especially when we know we might be discussing it here on the podcast, because we want to you know, save our ammunition for that. But I don't want to divert things too much, but I did get a sense of there was some horror in it. The whole situation was fucking horror to me. Like, it wasn't horror in the classical sense, like fucking demons jumping out of the woods and shit, but like those kids were being murdered and stuff. That was fucking
100%.
What?
We're not meant to watch this and root for the system. It's supposed to be horrific. That's why the kills in this are unflinching, right? Like, they do not edit away often unless it's important for the story part that they do, right?
And I'm going to put that in front of your face.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, that's an intentional decision, but even beyond that, we're meant to experience and feel like, you know, Dan mentions here in chat, you know, about the prize being the ultimate carrot on the stick, the illusion of choice and reward in a system designed only to exploit and destroy. 100% right. And that's the horror of this. That is the true horror, that these characters, like if you extend the metaphor, these characters weren't on a walk for 4 days. These characters have been on this walk their entire lives, because this is the funnel. This is what the system wants them to do. And even when they get off of this, you know, whoever wins is still going to be on that walk for the rest of their life, because they still live under the thumb of the system that allows kids to walk and get murdered for national patriotism.
And I think that one of the I agree. But I think that one of the strong themes in this film that hit me was the folly of youth, right? Because these kids grew up. Now they did this every year, I think, right? So these kids grew up probably watching this long walk. They knew about it. They saw kids getting murdered, right? Probably every year they watched it, right? And so, but in their minds, they're probably like, I can win. I'm better than that kid who just got shot in the face. I'm better than that kid and that kid and that kid. I'm going to win. That's the folly of youth. That's the false bravado, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That, you know, that these kids are dumb. They might be desperate, but they're also fucking stupid, right? Like, that's what came across to me. Like, dude, why did you put yourself in this situation? I get it that you're maybe poor, you may be destitute, your home life sucks, but maybe it's better than a bullet in the head. I don't know. In my mind,
let's just look at kind of a real life analog here. You know, there are a lot of reasons someone might turn to crime. Like, let's say, you know, like mid-level theft type stuff, right? There's a lot of reasons someone might do it, but there is a non-zero, and I would say significant number of people who turn towards, you know, the crime initially out of necessity, right? You know, we hear those stories about people who they had no other way out but to follow these others who were doing this one thing. And we can look at that and go like, this fucking kid grabbed a grabbed a gun that he borrowed from his parents' house and went over and tried to rob a convenience store. What a fucking idiot kid. But it's because of that kid's circumstances that may be like what he felt was his only option. Not to say that it was his only option, but and unfortunately we have a system that, you know, continues to create those striations, right? And so kind of forces people to unfortunately make that decision again. So I think that's very much correct, Jim. I think that it plays off of the, you know, look, I know that this is dumb, but I'm personally immortal thing that kids have, you know, while
kids think they're untouchable. Yeah.
So do rich kids oftentimes.
They do.
I felt like some of these characters were very much embodying that, and that actually made it interesting for me. So now to find out that it's only the poor kids that do this walk, I think robs it even more of some of its like weight for me, because I feel like we've gotten the message through so many movies, like the things you do when you're desperate and poor, you know, are a thing, and like I get that, but part of the interesting thing for me was like, here are these kids, everybody puts their name in because the Garrity character told us, like, socially that is what you are expected to do, and if you don't do it, I guess there's consequences. But I guess it's just the poor kids. So it's like every other movie about this has told that story. Like, what makes that interesting?
It's probably rigged.
You know,
if you're a producer of a show called The Long Walk where you're going to murder kids, like you want to see that potential rags to riches story, right? You're not going to put, you know, it's like watching Survivor, which also I thought of when I was watching the show. This movie is like Survivor, right? Like, yeah, like, you know, whenever there's Survivor and you learn a little bit about the cast members, if you have somebody in there that's like making a ton of money, they're very successful in life, you don't generally tend to root for them. Like, you don't, at least I don't. I'll be
unless
honest,
they have really great gameplay and are
unless they're fun
socially
to watch, unless they're super fun to watch and entertaining. But generally, you know, you're like, that person doesn't need a fucking $1 million. Let's root for this person.
So there is, you said Survivor, there is a concept called survivorship bias, where we tend to only understand the stories and the circumstances from those who are around to tell the story at the other end of it, right? So if, for example, if a terrible tragedy happens and one person survives and 9 people don't, the one person that survived is the one that's going to tell the story. And because of that, now the story of that entire incident is filtered through the lens of the one person. So when you say that, I think that that's very much a truth here. You know, like the kids, all of America watches, you know, the other 49 people get killed, but then they get to spend time at the end with the one who, you know, who gets celebrated and gets their wish. And then suddenly that becomes the new narrative. The narrative is not, well, think about, do you remember that one kid that got killed on mile 5? And it's, remember that one kid who wished for an elephant, you know? And so that survivorship bias plays into why, if you know, if you're looking for options, this feels like a good one. I do want to double to, because I want to talk about kind of the ending of
we
this.
do need to wrap, by the way.
Yeah.
We're getting very long.
Absolutely. Just
my computer will crash when I edit the show.
I'm going to say we have cats who are about to riot
Yeah.
because their dinner's an
Yeah.
hour late.
But I want to
just-
get back to Dan's question, right? About the end.
Yes. So I don't want to go too. I'm going to be cautious on this because, and Dan, maybe message me on Facebook, because what you're asking here is sort of like a kind of how the book ends, and the book and the movie end in the last act are pretty dramatically different. So if I were to go into the book ending, it would be dramatic spoilers.
Well, wait, isn't Dan saying, as a reader of the book as well, my favorite part was asking how other readers felt it ended.
The
So
book. I think he's talking
does the
about.
book like clarify that?
Oh, yeah. So I guess it. Yeah, I guess what I'm going to clarify here is I'm only going to talk about this in the context of the movie, because both of them end in. I mean, when I say dramatically different ways, I'm talking like, it's not like, oh, this is a cheeky change. It is kind of a rewritten kind of like last little bit. So
but does the book leave it open to interpretation like the movie does? That's the question I've got.
It leaves a different thing open to a different interpretation. We can go into it afterwards. There's no way to talk spoiler free on the book right now.
Okay.
But with the movie, so one of the things I liked thematically that we got here is, so Garrity's character has this drive. He's looking at the end goal, and what's driving him to win this walk is hate,
revenge.
This grudge, this desire for revenge, however you want to do it. Whereas Peter's whole story is about the moments. They have this conversation about the end goal versus the moments, and he's experiencing each of the moments, each of the connections, and based off of some of the experiences that we learned about from his past, and kind of what got him to where he's at. This is a character who I think, if you want to summarize it really lightly, you can say is embracing love, for the kind of what his ultimate goal is, or kind of how he interacts with the other people on his walk. Both of them learn something from one another through here. And I think that's what's so cool. Garrity learns to sort of sacrifice his hate, sacrifice his revenge, because he believes in something that Peter that offers different, right? And I think that's cool. And Peter learns that sometimes an act of love is confronting a corrupt system. And so he did the same thing that Garrity was going to do, but for a very different reason. And I think that is a pretty profound way to sort of land the plane here. Ultimately, he turns around and he keeps walking. And as I kind of mentioned sort of before, he's been on this walk his entire life, and he's going to always be on this walk. This is what society's built for him. Whether that walk be 5 more steps and he gets shot, or whether he continues to move down the line, things are not going to be magically great for him. The system is still there, but he did at least put some cracks in it on national television. So even if he's still on this walk, maybe there's some hope that other people might be able to veer off it eventually. That's what was so fucking cool about the conversations that these two characters had and how that ended. Very different than the book. I love the way the book ended. I love the way the movie ended. Not comparing the two in terms of quality. I just like the way the movie did their version of it.
At least, if I have to give the movie one thing, at least it didn't end with them both eating the berries and surviving. At least it actually stuck to its guns, literally, and there was only one survivor. So, mad props to that.
Right. And Dan's question was, do we think he got away with it at the end? Do we think? I personally, and this is open to interpretation. I'm not a book reader. I personally don't think he did. Not with the military there, because that last scene was strangely filmed. There were no bystanders on the street that was lined with people just a moment before. I think that was a fantasy ending.
Yeah.
After he did what he did.
Yeah. I think ultimately it lands, my thought on it is he probably didn't. Whether he did or he didn't is less important to me than the fact that he probably didn't, but he still won something at the end.
Right.
He still like accomplished something. And so I think there's hope in with that kind of despair of what's happening next.
It was the friends we made along the way before they got murdered by tanks and guns. All right. Well, great discussion. And Jim, to your point, absolutely. Anytime we get into heated discussions, that's definitely a good thing. Art is open to different interpretations. I think it's when we make it not okay to have different opinions that it becomes a different conversation. And I think we do a pretty decent job of trying to meet each other where we're at and hear what we think. I think it's just important, that the conversation is happening. And so it's great to have a movie out right now that is sparking discussions like these. And Dan, thanks so much for jumping into the jumping into the chat with us and sharing your thoughts as well. I'm going to turn off the spoiler ticker because our movie conversation is over. Just a heads up for y'all, we are off next week relative to when we're recording, and then we will be back with you in a couple of weeks. Jim and Will are going to be at Fantastic Fest, which is so exciting. I'm super jazzed y'all are going to get to hang out. I'm bummed that our cat Cora unfortunately needs care and I've got to stay here, but Will, I may be out in a few weeks later anyway, so maybe we'll still get a chance to hang. But
see a movie.
Awesome.
See a movie together.
Well, maybe we'll see. That would be cool. But hopefully you guys have a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll have some kind of post Fantastic Fest coverage from Jim and Will talking about some of the films coming out. So be on the lookout for that. And if anyone wants to connect with us between now and that post Fantastic Fest coverage, let's let them know how they can reach out. Jim Pugliafco, how can people find and talk to you?
Oh boy, you can find me on Letterboxd. My handle there is JJP Out West, which JJP is my initials, Out West, all one word. And you can find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafco, just like it's here on the screen if you can see it.
All right, thanks, Jim. Well, how about for you?
Let's see. I'm limiting down to just a few platforms these days. The ones that I'll talk about here: Facebook. Look for William Lindis. That's what I'm using for just general social stuff. Letterboxd. I'm at the Movie Bear there. Still logging films and doing a bunch there. I also set up at the Movie Bear on Goodreads because I've been doing more reading and decided that I should do the Letterboxd approach to it too. And so I would much rather us do that and connect over movies or books than over whatever's happening on my deleted Twitter account. So look for me in those places.
All right, excellent. Thanks. Well, folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Bradley Harris. I'm the one that probably has bear, chub, chaser, dolphin, wolf, otter, pup, whatever friends in common with you. You can also find me on Letterboxd at iBradPro. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Jim, Will, this was a hell of a lot of fun. As always, love you both. We will see you all next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.